So tax grab or creative and effective climate policy? Let's talk about that with two guests from Toronto. I'm joined by Plamen Petkov. He is the Vice President of the Ontario branch of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. And here in our studios is Dale Marshall, the National Program Manager at Environmental Defence. Good to see you both. Thanks for being here to talk about this. It dominated a lot of the conversation on Parliament Hill today. Mr. Petkov, let me start with you. Why do you view this carbon tax rebate plan from the federal government as an attack on business?
Well, we were quite worried yesterday when we saw the announcement from the Prime Minister. Obviously, he laid out a plan for a backstop carbon tax plan for those four provinces who currently don't have a carbon pricing regime, so Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Ontario, and New Brunswick. We learned that there will be rebates for consumers, which is, I think, great news for individuals like all of us. We also learned that some of the large emitters will be able to apply for exemptions. What we didn't hear much about is what's going to happen to small and medium-sized businesses, and how is that going to affect them.
Right. So, what do you think? What do you think is going to happen?
Our worry really is that small and medium-sized businesses will be asked to fund the vast majority of this program. They are not going to be eligible for rebates, or it seems like only 10% of the funding is going to go into rebates to businesses and hospitals and municipalities and universities and so on, and the rest is going to residents and consumers. So, especially if large emitters are allowed to be exempt to a certain way under the output-based system, then we are concerned that it will be small businesses footing the bill.
All right, Dale Marshall, does Mr. Petkov, Petkov have a valid concern here?
Oh, for sure. In terms of how the revenue is used, that there are different ways of using that, right? There are literally hundreds of millions of dollars that are going to be returned to small and medium-sized enterprises. So that is part of the plan, in addition to the rebates that are going to individuals and households. The question is this overall a policy that we want to be seeing? And the reality is that we do want to be putting into place a polluter pay system. We don't want polluters to just be able to freely pollute the atmosphere. And so this is the kind of program that will incentivize enterprises reducing their emissions. It will improve the health of Canadians. It will make renewable energy more affordable. So there are a whole bunch of reasons why this makes sense from a policy perspective.
Right, but that's that 10% of the money that's being set aside to help, and it's some small and medium-sized businesses, some municipalities, hospitals. Yeah. Is that going to be enough to satisfy the concerns of small business that they're not being targeted here, that they're not carrying the freight on these changes?
Well, I'll let Plamen answer that one. It sounds like they're feeling like they're being targeted. Personally, I think that the government should be putting more money into funding emission reductions within that sector, within municipalities, hospitals, schools, and small and medium enterprise businesses. Because if you put that money into programs that will help them to reduce their energy costs, improve their energy efficiency, then over time they're getting both rebates and they're decreasing their energy costs.
Right. Mr. Petkov, what's the concern for you in terms of, do you know yet what it'll actually mean for small business owners, and particular, those that may use large amounts of energy in either the retail or service industries or manufacturing? Do we know yet what effect it'll have on them?
Well, that is the problem, that we don't know. And what we heard from the federal government yesterday is that they'll be releasing more details in the beginning of 2019. That is already too late. The program starts January 1st, 2019. I think our members have a very legitimate concern here. Dale makes a good point. We should not be encouraging large emitters to be polluting more. Our understanding is that there'll be exemptions for some of the large emitters. No such exemptions for, let's say, a small business down the street, whether it's retail, whether it's a small manufacturing plant. So at the end of the day, what we are asking for here is fairness. We want small and medium-sized businesses to be treated fairly under this program. And if, in fact, there's going to be a carbon tax, then everybody should be paying their fair share, not just asking a specific sector like small businesses to foot the bill.
Sure.
If there's going to be a rebate program, then everybody who pays into the program should be eligible for a rebate, not a 90-10 percent split.
Okay, let me bring Dale in on that. Is there a problem with a plan that treats so many sectors, so many emitters differently? Is that a flaw in the plan?
It's not a flaw that there are some concessions being made to large industry, and here's why. What we don't want to have happen is apply a tax in Canada and send a cement manufacturer, for example, across the border to the U.S.
Right.
Because
can't do business here. I'm not going to do this. See you later.
We're no better off from a climate perspective, and yet we've lost, a business here in Canada, right? So that's the reason why there are 80 to 90% exemptions for large industry is because of that, because of competitiveness concerns. What I'm worried about with respect to that detail is that the sectors aren't targeted enough. It should be targeted only at industries that are really subject to carbon leakage, who could leave the country because of competitiveness concerns. And right now, it's much too broad, and the exemption is much too high. So I agree that large industrial polluters need to be paying a larger fraction of the carbon.
So how do you answer the concerns of small business then? Would it make sense to give them the same kinds of exemptions? Or, I mean, how many small business owners, and I don't want to diminish the concern, but how many small business owners would say tomorrow that I'm packing up and going to the States? There aren't that many of them that are that mobile, I don't think. But
yeah, and that's what this program is intended to do, is to avoid businesses leaving. At the same time, as I said before, I would be happy to have more money going into programs that would help small and medium-sized businesses to reduce their energy costs, and therefore to help both their economic bottom line and the amount of emissions they put out in terms of the energy they use.
Okay, just quickly, so all these rebates going back to families, so where's that money come from?
Well, it comes from the fuel charge.
If they're getting back more money than they actually are going to spend, according to the government, who's paying that?
So fuel charges are being put on all fuels. So that's fuels used by individuals and households, by large industry, and by small and medium-sized enterprises. The amount that's being returned, it's only 90% of the total, but that's more than what households pay, which is why 8 out of 10 people are going to be better off, and the only households that are not going to be better off are generally going to be very high income.
And so the concern of small businesses, who's paying for the rebate money then? If I pay $320 a year in energy costs, which is sort of the numbers the government says, and I get back $500, more than I actually spend on energy costs, where am I getting the extra $200 from?
Well,
who's providing that?
And that's fuel charges that are being put on large industry and other businesses that are not households.
Mr. Petkov, where do you think that money's coming from?
Well, again, it's coming from small and medium-sized businesses. We talked about that the large emitters will be exempt, and that's a huge percentage, 80% of large emitters. I mean, I understand the whole, argument about competitiveness and wanting to keep big business here, but the same competitiveness argument should apply to small and medium-sized businesses. We feel that they're being taken for granted just because they cannot say to the government, I'm going to pack and go to the States. Well, they may not all of them may be able to pack and go to the States.
No, but they might close down.
Shut down.
Yeah.
Large industries will be paying the full fuel cost.
Right.
What they won't be paying is with respect to the emissions that they put out. And so,
they'll pay the extra energy costs, but not the charges on emissions.
That's right. So, and they're not entirely exempt, right? They're exempt. They're much too exempt because they're 80 to 90% exempt, but they're not entirely exempt on the emission side. On the fuel side, that gets paid by every fuel user, individuals, small businesses, large industry.
Okay, I mean, let me finish on this. I mean, the whole objective of the plan is to get consumers to change their collective behavior and do less, use less fossil fuels, and basically. Does it do that if people are told, if you spend, you're likely to spend this amount, but we're going to give you back more than that? How does that change behavior?
Well, it does, because it makes polluting behavior more expensive.
Right, but if it costs me $300 next year on extra energy costs, but the government gives me back $500, I'm still ahead.
Yes, but you've been given an incentive. You've been given free money. You can do it with what you want. It does that money does not change your behavior. What might change your behavior is that now gasoline costs 4 cents more, and next year it'll be 6 cents more, and in 4 years it'll be 11 cents more. And so the next time you buy a car, you think, hey, maybe I'm going to buy a more fuel-efficient vehicle. Maybe, maybe it's worth insulating my house because natural gas prices are going up. Like those, so the incentive to reduce energy use and reduce emissions is still there. Even if you get a rebate check, you can do what you want with that check.
Okay, and do you see any incentives there for small business, Mr. Petkov?
Well, that is the challenge that we have with this, is that we're not convinced that this is going to change behavior. To your point earlier, Peter, if I see that my check is higher than the cost that I'm paying, actually I'm encouraged to not to worry about it. And if the price of fuel goes up next year by 5 cents or 6 cents, then my rebate check supposedly is going to go up too. So this is not an incentive to change behavior at all. And we have been asking governments to provide real incentives, both for consumers and for small businesses, not necessarily in the form of regulation, not necessarily in the form of carbon tax. And we believe that incentives and not punitive regulations or expensive carbon schemes are the way to go. For example, last time we surveyed our members, we have 110,000 small and medium-sized members across Canada, and we survey them a lot, very regularly. Last time we surveyed them, about 97% said that they have already made changes in their business to be environmentally friendly. And that's not because of regulations, that's not because of carbon tax or any other carbon pricing regime.
Okay, final thoughts? Any more that can be done to satisfy the concerns of small business? Do you think they're being unfairly treated, number one? And if you think they are, what more could the government do? I suppose you touched on it earlier, but more money into the fund to support.
Yeah, I mean, I do think this is the kind of program that we need in order to reduce emissions and improve the health of Canadians. I do wish there was more support for those who are affected and who could make changes in their lives in order to reduce their energy costs and improve their environmental bottom line.
All right, we may be just at it's an ongoing debate. We may be at the front end of the debate on this particular program, but I want to thank both of you for your time today. Good conversation. Thank you both.
Thanks.
Thank you.